quality education and job opportunities early in life has a negative long-term effect on earnings and human potential. So ensuring that youth are prepared to succeed in the workplace is key to securing their well-being and the well-being of their community. We know that in the City of Madison, approximately 5% of youth ages 16 to 24 are disconnected from school and work, and the majority of these disconnected youth are youth of color. We're so pleased to have Greg here with us today to share with us some of the important work Operation Fresh Start is doing in our community to address these challenges. Before I turn it over to Greg, though, I'd like to quickly share some background on forward community investments. FCI has been serving the state of Wisconsin for over 20 years. We're an investor, connector, and advisor for organizations and initiatives that reduce social, racial, and economic disparities in Wisconsin communities. With the help of BMO Harris Bank, we're able to offer this series of webinars focused on racial equity. We want to express our gratitude to BMO Harris Bank for being an active partner in Wisconsin communities. You can join the webinar using the telephone number provided in your confirmation email that was sent to you from GoToWebinar, or you can use your computer speakers. There will be opportunities for Q&A, so if you have questions or comments during the discussion, please submit them using the chat or questions box on the right-hand side of your screen. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Samara. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this webinar and part of this series. I am Greg Markle, Executive Director of Operation Fresh Start, and it is nice to be here. Today we want to talk about racial disparity and economic disparity, specifically for youth, those aging into adulthood from childhood. And we're going to talk about some of the issues which they face, some of the disparities in our community, but then also talk about some things that are working and some opportunities for this youth. So I usually try to start any discussion by talking about Operation Fresh Start a little bit. And first I have a poll to see what folks do know about Operation Fresh Start. So you can select your answer on the poll below. Okay, so here we go. And as we go through this poll, please remember that it's an election day in Wisconsin. You have the chance to participate in this poll and also other polling stations throughout your community. So we're getting some responses in. Ooh, and it looks like a good mix of responses. So from this, it looks like a number of people do know quite a bit about Operation Fresh Start, and that's great. The organization has been around since 1971, and our mission is to provide disconnected youth a path to self-sufficiency. We do use the building of affordable housing and doing significant conservation projects as we do that, but our mission is really centered on the youth and the fact that we've built over 240 affordable housing units and done major conservation projects, including building a whole park for Dane County, are sort of our secondary wonderful outcomes. The goal is for youth to move forward into self-sufficiency. So we've been in Dane County for over 45 years. We're the only Dane County organization focused specifically on working with youth ages 17 to 24 who are disconnected. And if you've ever known a youth age 17 to 24, you might think that every youth in that age group might be a little disconnected. But specifically, we work with youth who are not connected to employment and not connected to education. So they either haven't finished high school or they've finished high school but haven't moved farther towards a path to success. And we work with them to help them develop a path to success and move forward on it. So over 78% of our youth that we work with are people of color. And we've actually been replicated in 7 other communities in Wisconsin. So there's other Fresh Start organizations around Wisconsin. So if you're in Milwaukee or Stevens Point or even up in Superior, you might be familiar with another Fresh Start organization which is based on what we do. Where we are in the community is we sit at that junction of achievement gap and racial disparity. We help young people achieve a high school diploma through our Pathways program, which is our largest program and our oldest program. And we help young people move forward to engage in post-secondary education or employment to attain self-sufficiency. So it's youth who are coming from poverty. About 50% of our youth are housing insecure. Many are coming from extreme trauma in their home. A number of youth are coming out of the foster care system. So those are the youth which we love to work with. And we help them significantly change their path. It's exciting to work with people at this juncture. You know, there's a number of books written about coming of age, and the most interesting thing about folks who are transitioning from childhood to adulthood is their future is an empty palette. They definitely have a past, and there's a painting of what their past was, but their future as an adult is unwritten. So the youth can really work on where they are going forward, and as an organization, Operation Fresh Start gets to help them determine what that future is. So one of the issues which we focus on is the achievement gap. And this chart which you see before you is information on the achievement gap throughout Wisconsin. Different communities have slightly different charts, but this is from the DPI, Department of Public Instruction. And it shows that youth of color have a much greater likelihood to not achieve a high school diploma in 4 years, or even in a 6-year cohort. So youth who are African American, it's 25% of those youth are not going to complete high school in 4 years, whereas of white students it's only 4.2%. So it's a significant difference. Now the interesting thing about a high school diploma is when and how can people get a high school diploma? And that brings us to our next poll, which is through what age can a youth earn a high school diploma in this state of Wisconsin? Okay, the results are coming in. And the answer actually is, by state law, the answer is age of 21. So in Madison, we have a special arrangement with the high school where youth in our program can attain a high school diploma up to age 24. In most communities, well, throughout the state of Wisconsin, folks can attain a GED at an older age, and they could receive some sort of an honorary diploma from a high school if a school board chose to do it. But really the answer is 21, which is an important age to remember, that high school diploma isn't a 4-year high school activity completion. It is up to age 21. And there's a lot of opportunities for folks to complete that high school diploma up to age 21. After that, a young person would have to work on a GED. A high school diploma is a much more effective tool as a young person moves forward, especially in the workplace. There's a number of employers who accept a high school diploma but not a GED. So working with youth to make sure that they can get that high school diploma by age 21 is very important. Next poll is, what is the cost to the community of a youth not attaining a high school diploma? So each of us pays taxes, and our taxes supports a number of different items in the community, and youth who don't attain a high school diploma have a lesser chance of employment and a lesser chance of success. So there is a significant cost to the community. And we're getting some results tailing in now. There actually have been a number of studies on this, and different results look at different aspects of a high school diploma, everything from the actual costs in corrections, costs in healthcare, costs in childcare. The study which Operation Fresh Start cites is one used in the New York Times, which is generally considered a positive and honest news source, and it cites that $250,000 is the cost to a community for a young person to not have achieved a high school diploma. And the reality is a young person without that high school diploma isn't going to be mobile because they aren't going to have money to move. So those costs are borne by each of us if that young person doesn't achieve that high school diploma by the age which that high school diploma is available. So we have one more poll. That's in school districts. A general high school typically works with young people age up to 18 or maybe 19. And the next poll is, does your community have a plan to re-engage students who haven't completed high school in the 4 years which are generally allotted? And we're getting some results in. And it's fairly evenly split at this point. So we are going to talk later about some solutions, but this is obviously one solution. What often happens is a young person either stops attending school before they reach the age of 18, or maybe keeps attending through what would be their typical senior year, and then summer happens. And then the next fall, school district is very busy working with the young people who are coming into the school and helping them move forward. And that 19, 20, or 21-year-old is often forgotten. There isn't a way which young people generally use to drop out of school. The typical way a young person stops going to school is they just stop going. And schools who don't actively engage in the community to try to have that young person come back or engage in alternative programming are losing that opportunity for that young person and that opportunity for the school to garner state additional aid and other resources to help the young people move forward. So the next question is, what do school children, or high school seniors specifically, look to do once they graduate? Because that's the other population which Operation Fresh Start works with, and another population which is sort of in that transition point. So seniors in Wisconsin high schools go through a survey. They actually answer during the last month of school, what are their plans? And what you see on the screen before you is the results of that survey. And what you see here is that in the four-year college area, it is topped with whites and Asians as far as going to four-year college. At a vocational college level, it's pretty even across the different ethnicities. And then as you go down to employment, it's interesting that a much smaller segment of the population has deemed that employment is going to be their first step after high school, and then job training is even lower. Then you get to the area of no plans. And actually what that no plan stands for is it's a combination of a number of different categories for folks who really don't have an employment plan or a career path in which they're looking to engage in, or people who actually just say, I don't know. So what you see here is that among Hispanics and blacks, that rate is up towards 30% of young people who, when leaving high school with that high school diploma, still don't have a plan for their next step. So then if we look at a combination for blacks of folks who are leaving high school without a high school diploma and or have no plan, I'll let you do some math as you take the next poll, and we look at what is the percentage of young people who are African Americans who leave high school without a plan and or don't even complete high school. Okay. And your math is fair. The correct answer is actually 66%. So when you add up those young folks who were not planning to attend college and or those young people who were not actively engaged in a plan for after college, the total comes to 66%. So 2/3 of African Americans in the state of Wisconsin are leaving those high school years without a plan of where they're going to end up going forward, or what their path is going forward. So with that, then we can dive a little deeper into those folks who are planning to go on to post-secondary education. And what we find is that the paths used to take is, even though 30% of blacks say that they plan to attend a four-year college, only 4% of the UW system are African Americans. And within the Wisconsin technical college systems, this would be that vocational path or the two-year degree path. 4.6% of the 2015 program graduates were black. So what we can come away with is, as you scale back the percentages, even though 30% had stated that they were headed towards college and then more headed towards the vocational system, those who actually engage and are actively engaged in those systems, if you're a person of color and specifically an African American, it ends up being an even lower percentage. So why is this? What's going on with young people as they're completing high school and trying to figure out what's next? And it comes down to the fact that young people have a different brain than we do. As they're maturing, the human brain doesn't actually completely mature until the age 25. And men or boys tend to mature slower than women in this area. So you end up with a youth who is coming to the age of adulthood, but yet doesn't have that completely mature brain. So their prefrontal cortex is still growing and developing, and that's where many of the decision-making functions happen. And the level of dopamine produced shifts during adolescence. So I am far from a brain chemist, but what's happening with older youth is their ability to make long-term decisions on their future is not as great as when they're older. And the levels of dopamine, which search for immediate gratification, are higher than for older people. So they face some additional challenges in trying to decide on their future and then enacting that future in a positive way. So the brain development impacts the youth's behavior, basically. And the youth's behavior is going to be impacted wherever they are, whether they're actively engaged in a four-year college or a tech college, or if they aren't. So the young person will have a greater willingness to take risks. They're more likely to seek pleasure through actions and consumption. Drug use and alcohol use are the two largest indicators of this, which we see. And they have a lower ability to understand the consequences and make long-term plans. So when discussing with the youth, they may think going to that party this weekend is a wonderful thing without thinking, oh, maybe the police will show up on this party. Oh, I have a ticket. What should my actions be related to this? So it creates a whole cycle of activities and impact and how that affects their future going forward. So with that, Wisconsin has developed a whole process where youth have a safe place where they can make mistakes and try to figure out their future, which is wonderful that Wisconsin has thought to do this. Actually, the state of Wisconsin invests over $1 billion of state funds in this programming for older youth where they can make mistakes, test out different career directions, and try to figure out where they want to engage in the workplace as they go forward. that system is called the University of Wisconsin system. That system is the system which is significantly more white than other ethnic groups. So you have $1 billion worth of resources being focused on a system for mid to upper income individuals who are coming from families which have the greatest ability to support them, while the state invests about $1 million in youth-specific employment training for young people. Now, that doesn't mean that the young people don't have access to other services, but as we recall, that young person's brain is different, and that young person's engagement in benefit systems or employment training is going to be different than what one would expect from people who are 25 and older. So what we have created is a system in which the difference at this juncture of their life for youth, as far as both economic disparity and racial disparity, is greater at this point than at any other point in their lifetime. So through the school system, they were engaged in a system which directly worked to provide additional resources for people who are underachieving. So there was additional services in the educational realm. There was additional services just in basic needs. There was breakfast and lunch available for free. A young person leaves that school setting, and they come into a harsh world, and while they're engaging in this world, folks who are more affluent, and the reality is more white, are engaged in a system which the state funds at $5,000 per youth for them to learn how to be adults. So why this matters to you and your community is the reality that is the youth who aren't headed to college end up with a lot more challenges in their community than the youth who is headed to college. So lack of opportunities in neighborhoods, specifically in employment. A lot of neighborhoods who are more impoverished have less opportunities for employment. The job centers aren't in those neighborhoods. There's limited employers. There's limited training for life after high school. Again, they aren't at those settings where that training happens. And there's a decrease in basic needs and social supports at age 18. So once again, you're aging out of the school system, and if you are the youngest or only child, your family is also aging out of some social services which are available for parents of kids. Another factor in this is there's a lack of an affordable path to get a driver's license. So a driver's license is a significant step towards adulthood in Wisconsin society. And in many schools, it's a fee-for-service opportunity. So again, youth who are coming from families with limited means might not have that affordable path to a driver's license. So what does this look like for that youth? There ends up being additional criminal behavior and recidivism rate. Tickets. So in Wisconsin, if you don't have a driver's license and you have significant tickets, you can't get that driver's license because the DMV basically suspends before you even get it the opportunity to get the driver's license. And also other minor offenses which are happening in communities are treated differently in that community than they would be in that wonderful safe environment called a university. So if you get caught underage drinking within your dorm room in a university, you probably have a conversation with your resident advisor. If you get caught underage drinking in Allied Drive or Darber-Worthington or some other neighborhood which is highly impoverished, you're going to get a ticket. And if you don't take care of that ticket right away, you're going to get additional tickets, and the fines keep adding up. So then you aren't able to get a driver's license, you drive illegally, you get tickets for that, and it just ends up being sort of this big cycle of additional costs, which is tough to get over. So that's how minor violations are handled differently in the communities. And the recidivism rate is nearly 50% for this older youth population. So that's for youth who have been engaged in the criminal justice system, what they face as they get into that ticket cycle, and then it just keeps sort of snowballing on them. So it's a huge effect on our neighborhoods and the youth in the neighborhoods. And through all of this, make no mistake, but that youth is seeing that disparity. They might not be able to quote the numbers which I've provided in this webinar, but they see that disparity. As that youth is traveling through Madison or through your community, they're seeing those other young people who are headed towards college in that safe learning environment with a lot of governmental support while they aren't in that. And that disparity becomes poignant and specifically directed at them. But we will have jobs, jobs, jobs. So we're past the Great Recession and we're moving into an economic growth period. And even through the Great Recession, everyone was speaking of the reality that baby boomers are going to be retiring. So there's going to be jobs, there's going to be a need for a diverse workforce, and there's going to be a desire for everyone to engage in that. So what will those jobs look like? They'll be big jobs. 5 out of the top 30 growth careers in the next 10 years require at least a bachelor's degree. But 10 require on-the-job training, 5 require an internship or apprenticeship, and 5 require an associate's degree. So with this, 25 out of 30 of those jobs won't require that bachelor's degree. Now these jobs are going to have varying wages connected to them, but they're all going to be a step forward on the economic ladder for youth who are coming out of poverty. And through the policies which are in place, the youth who are coming out of poverty who aren't engaged in that four-year institution don't have as many opportunities to move forward on that ladder. And I'm in no way disparaging the UW system or the technical college system. They have an important role in the community. But the African-American youth coming out of a community where there's a significant amount of poverty, they aren't connected with those establishments. So, have you learned anything yet? Hopefully you've learned something. So we have a little poll just to see if you're still listening. And if you have any questions, we can go through a few questions because from here we're going to try to slide into some of the answers. Okay. No one's actually doing something else during this webinar? All right. Well, good. I'm glad it's being somewhat educational. And I'm not seeing any other questions coming up at this point, so I think we'll move forward. Oh, it looks like we do have one.
So we do have a question. The question is, what types of attempts have the UW system made so far to better connect with impoverished neighborhoods?
Well, I think that there have been attempts. They've definitely worked on creating opportunities for people of color, and there are scholarship programs available for youth of color. Some of the things that are barriers is not just a sort of perception among certain populations that the UW system isn't for them, but also even if And Milwaukee and Madison have tried this in the technical college area. Even if college is paid for, the young person who's coming out of poverty has to live. So the greatest reason that folks drop out of school typically isn't that they don't have money for the tuition, it's that they don't have money to live while attending school. So they have to get a job or another job or another job, and thus don't have time to study. So it's sort of the whole package which is necessary to prepare a young person where they can be successful in college, help that first generation college student understand how to be successful in college, but then that package of support and helping that young person work through the decision matrix so that they can be successful in college. So there's a lot of levels towards engaging people coming from economic insecurity into thinking that college can be their future and then engaging in that successfully. Okay, so we're going to look at some options for solutions, and these are some options which largely we've seen have some positive impact. There are areas for expansion. So the first few are young adult specific career training. So specifically engaging youth in options for career training and have those options be paid. So that young person can at least get some sort of income while they're taking a step forward on the career path. Restorative justice for older youth, driver's license attainment, cross-cultural assistance, and high school re-engagement efforts. So we're going to sort of dive into each of these a little bit. So youth-specific employment and training. And this is really something which Operation Fresh Start engages in. Although we use construction and conservation as our sort of tools to get there, it's really about helping youth become ready to be employees and understand what their options are as they move forward in a career. So remember, youth learn differently. So adult employment training for re-engaging displaced workers isn't going to work. Putting youth into that same program with that person who's 45 and got laid off isn't going to connect with that youth well, and it's going to be a detriment on the overall program. So focusing on how youth learn in this type of training. Practical hands-on experience for tactile learners. So the majority of youth who Operation Fresh Start works with weren't successful sitting at a desk with 25 other kids in a classroom. That's not how they learned. The ability to learn hands-on, to do geometry while you're trying to figure out the amount of cement that's needed to pour a driveway makes the learning practical and engages that youth in what they need to know. Wraparound services for transition into adulthood. So in addition with that training is the wraparound services, because that young person is also oftentimes leaving their home and leaving some of those basic services. So not only do they need the training, but they also have to understand that in order for the training to work, they need housing, food, transportation, childcare, all those things which are necessary to make a training program successful. They need assistance in understanding what that next step is. Remember, that young person isn't experienced in long-term planning. Connection with employers and or post-secondary. So once a young person is engaged in an employment training program, the next step is employment. Typically, an employer will look for the most experienced candidate. As an executive director of an organization, I do that too. The important thing is to have a connection with employers who are willing to take a chance. And there are employers out there who are willing to take a chance on the younger worker who has gained some of that employment training and the opportunity to help that young person into that workplace and then help to make sure that they're successful in that workplace. So Operation Fresh Start success rate is 78%. So we successfully help young people attain a high school diploma and or go on to post-secondary education or self-sustaining employment 78% of the time, which is really a national model. We do a good job. We've been at it for a while, but it's doable, and it can make a huge impact for the now, but more importantly for the long-term success for that young person. So there's local programs, there's Fresh Starts. We're a member of a Youth Build, which is a national organization of about 200 job training organizations, which focuses on affordable housing. Core Network focuses on conservation, a very similar model. Job Corps is a similar model focusing on other jobs. All of these use AmeriCorps. So AmeriCorps is often thought of as something which you do after college. The reality is that young people of limited economic means often see AmeriCorps as that employment training process. So Operation Fresh Start has, in a given year, about 80 to 90 AmeriCorps members working forward in their career and doing good work for the community. And that's the other thing that these programs provide, is the ability for that youth to see themselves as a value to the community because they're providing affordable housing or doing major conservation projects where they're going to have a positive impact on the community, while through much of their life the youth didn't see that they could actually engage the community and have a positive impact and be a positive player in their future of their community. Restorative justice for 18 to 24-year-olds. So Dane County has a community court program which began in 2015, focusing on South Madison and Fitchburg areas. This year in the county executive's budget is the funding to extend it to countywide. It has a 75% success rate at clearing cases. It uses restorative justice measures to help the young people identify their role in criminal activity and try to restore or make whole whoever they damaged through it. What it does is it keeps that young person out of the criminal justice system. It focuses on nonviolent and non-drug related cases. So sort of those first cases, those limited cases, but it takes away, first of all, that record for that young person, but then also the economic impact for that young person of the fines and court costs and those things, which that young person often doesn't have the wherewithal to cover. So it's expanding to countywide in 2017. So we're really excited about this opportunity for our young people. It provides them with an option out of that cycle, out of that criminal justice cycle. Cross-cultural counseling. So one might think of this as cross-cultural white and black, or white and people of color. That is definitely part of it, and it's on both sides, both the employer and the employee side. The employer training in Dane County, the YWCA, does a wonderful job of helping employers understand what a diverse workforce is going to look like. And as our state and our nation becomes more diverse, employers are understanding that they are going to have a diverse workforce, and they're actively engaged in that and wanting to learn what the next steps are. But in this way, cross-cultural counseling is even broader. Really, the other side of it with youth is the transition from a culture from a high school to a transition of a culture to a workplace, which are extremely different cultures. So general employability training, interviewing, attire, workplace culture, and retention assistance, that a young person can keep the job. So if there's an issue at the job, how to work through that job. So an example of workplace culture is one thing which we work with our young people on is what to do during your break time. So in high school during your break time, you sit on a table and you yell back and forth to your friends. In an employment setting during your break time, that type of activity, even though you're on break, could get you fired. It's not an acceptable workplace culture activity. So sort of that understanding of how that culture is different in the workplace and how to work through that culture and be successful. High school re-engagement. So earlier we did a poll of how many communities have an effort to do high school re-engagement. So this is that young person who is faded from the high school setting and how to re-engage them in high school. There are communities throughout the country who do a great job on it. Local communities are working on it and trying to figure out ways of doing it. Some communities don't do it at all. Some communities, if you aren't done by 18, if you walk back in, they'll talk to you, but they don't actively engage in helping that 19 or 20-year-old understand how to graduate from high school. So in Dane County, Operation Fresh Start runs a program called Options, where we actually work with MMSD to find out who isn't completing high school in 4 years. Then we actively go out and engage those young people in how to complete high school. And we have found that it's effective to have a third party do it. The high school or the school district can do some engagement, but oftentimes at this point a 19 or 20-year-old might not be as willing to talk to a school because of sort of broken relationships. Something may have happened when that young person left. One story we have is a young person who was actually 1 credit short of graduating, and they were missing a physical education credit. So they were not going to walk back into that school. We worked with MMSD, Madison School District, on creating an independent study plan in physical education, which was largely doing some calisthenics and walking around the block. And they attained that high school diploma. If it wasn't for that third-party engagement, that young person in that school district weren't going to come to a solution. So the other part of it, though, is that that school district needs to be ready and willing to look at alternative programming for completion. These are the young people who didn't succeed in that classroom with 25 other youth. They aren't going to succeed as a 19 or 20-year-old going back into that classroom. And then case management to overcome barriers. Oftentimes, here again, the barriers of transportation or childcare came into play, and that's why they weren't completing the school. And then that continuation of caring support for that young person. Other thing for young people is driver's license attainment. So the largest screening tool employers use, at least in Dane County at the job center as you look through job opportunities, is high school diploma. The second biggest one is driver's license attainment. Truancy and ordinance infractions make it difficult to get a license. So if court systems can set up a way for young people to work out or work off through community service any tickets, it can provide them an opportunity to move forward. And really, these stats show that there is a significant difference between white and blacks attaining a driver's license. And considering it that it's the second greatest screening tool, this is absolutely a screening tool which differentiates employment opportunities for people of color and white folk. And the ability to overcome this can make a lot more opportunities available. So what else can you do? So those are sort of some of the program ideas, but just as an individual, there's things that you can do. Ban the other box. If you are an employer or if you know employers who have a driver's license as a requirement, check and see if it's necessary. There's a lot of employers who are on a bus system but still have a driver's license requirement in the application. And the young person or person can get to the employer, but the screening tool is stopping that employer from having a good employee. Provide an opportunity. If you are an employer, talk to your organization or company about how to help a young person who's looking for that first job, that first opportunity. Someone's got to give them a start. mentor. Again, either within your career field or just in general, look for opportunities to mentor a young person, help them understand what their next step is and where they can go. And then engage in change. Economic development in many communities is focused on creating economic development and building businesses which focus on high earners. So largely focus on people who have a bachelor's degree or a master's degree. The opportunity to flip that economic development mantra is there and look at communities investing in employers which are going to provide opportunities for all different workers, and specifically for those first-time workers or those workers who need to engage in employment which doesn't require that level of college. So those are some things that you can do locally. And I think that that's the end of the webinar largely as far as information on programming. I do have a little information on Fresh Start, Operation Fresh Start. We are engaged in a Building Futures campaign. So locally here in Dane County, we are engaged in a campaign to serve twice as many youth. And it is a capital campaign because what's really holding us back is our building space. So it is a campaign to raise $4.5 million to move into a new facility where we will be able to serve twice as many youth. We'll be able to do a greater variety of industry-specific training, especially in healthcare, which is a growing industry in Dane County. And we'll be able to do job counseling and for transitions into the workplace for a larger number of young people. So just helping young people understand the career opportunities that are out there and helping them move successfully into post-secondary or the workplace, and then helping them succeed through that. So we'd love for you to get involved in the Building Futures campaign, just to let your friends and associates know what we are up to in Dane County. And hopefully this webinar has provided you some insight on what you can do in your community to help youth have a path to self-sufficiency. And if there are some questions, I think we do have a little bit of time for some questions.
Well, please feel free to submit your questions in the chat or the questions feature and go to webinar. But I'd like to ask a question if that's possible. I just want to thank you, first of all, for a very rich and thoughtful discussion. The numbers were astounding, and it seems like there is just tremendous opportunity, but also just tremendous need in our community and throughout the state. And it just I just am wondering at the systems of policy level, what are some of the key levers, you know, maybe one or two that you think we need to be thinking about? And yeah, I have a couple more, but if we could just start there and we'll see if other folks have some other questions.
Sure. I think policy-wise, our greatest opportunities are at the local level to engage school districts and local governments in really recognizing the opportunity which is there in these youth, the opportunity to have them be a driver in the next generation, the next economy, and the importance of engaging them in that, because if you don't, then that opportunity is going to be lost and they become a cost factor rather than an economic driver. So engaging communities, and then as the state and national level, also supporting programs which do support youth training and youth opportunities and apprenticeships for youth, and these things which have been proven to be effective as we look at state and national policy also.
Thank you. Well, I will take the opportunity to ask another question, and audience members, again, please feel free to submit any questions you might have. I'd just like to maybe ask you about the key elements of the Operation Fresh Start model, which has made it so successful. 78% is an astounding number, and it's also very encouraging, but I'm sure you have a certain capacity. So what's made it successful, and how can we kind of support kind of replication throughout the state?
Probably the biggest key element is the staff, is a staff which is dedicated to creating personal relationships with young people and treating young people with respect, understanding where they came from, but also holding those young people to high expectations of where we think that young person can go. Because as I mentioned, the young person, as they're transitioning into adulthood, they have a clean palette. They can go a number of directions. And if we're able to treat them with respect and show that we care, we can help lead them that direction. So really it's just a caring, honest, dedicated adult connecting with that young person and helping them understand what their future possibility is. You know, we have wonderful English and math curriculum, and our workplace curriculum is great, but it's really that relationship which makes the difference.
Great, thank you. We do have a question from one of the participants, and they're curious about how Operation Fresh Start, and I think you maybe just touched on it, addresses issues of literacy, illiteracy with the youth that you work with.
Yeah, so the youth come to us with very different levels of both reading, writing, and arithmetic. And our goal is in about 8 months to raise that level by at least 2 grade levels. So, you know, if someone's coming to us with a 5th grade level, we probably aren't going to get them to a 12th grade level, but our goal is to get them at least to 7th and really to a 9th grade level. And the way we work with our curriculum is in really small group or independent, individualized learning. So again, our youth weren't successful in that class of 25, so we get them with a volunteer tutor or a teacher with a small group and focus specifically on where they are and where they need to go. We use a lot of manipulatives. We use that work site as an educational site, especially in math, and by doing that we make it relevant. But really, again, it's that small group and that interpersonal connection which helps our young people succeed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Well, I just want to let people know, if you're interested in finding out more about Operation Fresh Start, please go to their website, www.operationfreshstart.org. Thank you so much, Greg, for a thoughtful presentation and discussion. And as with all of the webinars, the recordings will be available for playback from our website. So one final note, when you close your browser from this session, you're going to be directed to a very concise questionnaire to evaluate today's webinar. Your input is really valuable to us. It helps us to continue to offer topics of interest to you and to improve the effectiveness of our webinars. Thanks again to BMO Harris for making this important learning opportunity available. Thanks for joining us today. Have a good day.